law is a lot more than words you put in a book, or judges, or lawyers, or sheriffs you hire to carry it out. It's everything people ever found out about justice and what's right and wrong. It's the very conscience of humanity. I'm Eddie Webb.
And I'm Chris Spivey.
And today we're going to talk about the Oxbow incident on Genreless. Hello and welcome to our next of our epic run of westerns that we're going to be talking about. And we have moved 4 years ahead, 5 years ahead. Not very many. Yeah. To the Oxbow incident.
You know what? If we concisely stuck to movies every 4 years to get us to current day, Eddie, we'd only do this run for about 30 weeks.
Is that all? Oh,
I don't know. I pulled that number out of my ass. So take that for what you will.
So we talked about a little bit in the very start of this run is that usually Chris and I both kind of contribute to these breakdowns, but for the Sherlock one, I more or less designed that run. In this case, Chris more or less designed this run. However, I don't know. Did you intentionally figure out which ones you were going to take, which ones I'm going to take, or did they kind of just pan out that way?
So the secret sauce, Eddie, would be if I told you that it just miraculously happened like that. It did not. I specifically planned out who would get what going throughout. Because some of them either I knew nothing about that I thought it'd be fun to have you tell me more about. Mm-hmm. Or some of them I thought Eddie would have a great time licking. And if he decides to read anything about this, enjoy this. Because there's one coming up that's going to be fucking amazing. And I can't wait for it.
That's fair. Because when I started watching this, it very much felt like you picked this film for me because it is a noirish style film with lots of people having long conversations about morality. And it's like, oh, those are things I do like.
It is. It's a Western noir.
And we have talked during the Doctor Who run about how ultimately, people in a room being really great actors talking about morality is like my Doctor Who and Star Trek sweet spot. So like, oh, this movie is basically just a whole lot of that. I'm like, well, there we go.
Like the Western for this is literally just a coating. It's like,
yeah,
they're in the West and they got guns. Maybe they might pull them out, but
yeah, no, like with very little rework, this could have been like a samurai film or a modern day crime thriller. I mean, it's on some level, it is, a bit like 12 Angry Men in some regards, where it's like a bunch of people in a room arguing about justice and about someone's life. So it's also a bit of court drama in that regard. Yeah, so like it's wild that like on one hand, it doesn't cleave to what most people traditionally think of as an action Western, but on the other hand, it's still a Western. Like you can't completely excise the Western from it because of how they got to here and the kinds of conversations they're having are very much what was happening in that particular part of the world at that particular part in taste and time, right? So it's much like a good Western. It's like, okay, it has to be in the American West in the 19th century. But also the themes it's going into are much more iconic outside of that.
I loved it. And when you think about it, like Henry Fonda for this should have come in and been like the action star, like hands down who he should have been. And this is not that movie.
No.
Which, funnily enough, one of the things I do know is Fonda said out of his time working with 20th Century Fox, this is one of his 2 favorite films that he made. He didn't like most of them he made, but he had 2. And this is one of the 2 films he made with him that he liked.
Yeah. And like, I can see that because again, like I went in more or less with no knowledge of the movie. I did a little research, which as a side note, I remember when we started this podcast and we prided ourselves on how we weren't going to do research for these things. And we have over time slid into, I now am pretty much always doing research for these, but it's Wikipedia research. It's not like massive research, but still I ended up having to do research.
It's essentially like we went to school and in 1st and 2nd grade, we just went and we hung out. In third and fourth grade, we got a little bit better. And now we're essentially in high school. So we feel obligated to do the work, but we're smart enough to wing it if we didn't do the work.
When do we get to the smoking in the bathroom phase of the podcast? Is what I want to know.
I think that's like year 10. So we got
Wow.
a
Okay.
ways to go. But we're men of a certain age. So maybe year 7, it will just like start smoking in the bathroom right away before we graduate.
It's like, fuck this podcast. I don't care anymore. You're not my real podcast. But yeah, like, so as you could tell, I hated the movie and didn't want anything to do with it. No.
I can tell by the smile on your face even before we
Right.
started.
Right. But no,
So
I did. So I
for
did.
long term for our 30 long term listeners, and for
Mhm.
those other 8,000 imaginary listeners that I imagine every week downloading the podcast, you may notice I sound a little strange. I'm a little sick. I'm going to put it out there. I'm not making just a raspy voice because we're talking about a Western. It's a
In a
listen.
world. Right. Yeah.
Sorry, I derailed you with my
No.
disclaimer about my
It's
voice.
fine. But like I said, I went into this with really no knowledge of the movie. And so when I saw, oh, it stars Henry Fonda and Harry Morgan, I was like, okay, I thought I kind of knew what movie I was going to get, and I was wrong. Because I was like, Henry Fonda, he's going to be, like I said, kind of tough action cowboy, and Harry Morgan's probably going to be the comedy sidekick, and that is just none of that is true, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I loved it. Love it. But we're both huge fans of noir. So I knew
Right.
I had a gut feeling that you really like this movie just from like how much of it is generally a noir film. The scary part is still how relevant this film is even
Yes.
today, right
That
now.
was that was the other thing I was going to mention is that in my notes I had and I cut out because it got repetitive, but there were certain lots of like, oh wow, a bunch of people going off half cocked and trying to hunt down people they think they know what's going on based on what they heard through the grapevine, not based on actual evidence. And then when presented with actual legal precedent, decide to fucking ignore that because it gets in the way of their boner for justice. That's not in any way relevant today, you know.
So yeah, all
Um,
following I think I feel comfortable enough to say all following a racist leader because that's a Confederate uniform. Although it's more movie talk, but there's a question about whether or not the character ever really served, which I don't think they did.
right? Yeah, and we'll get into that. But that's the other thing is like there's a lot of complexity. I mentioned this even in Stagecoach, right? There's like a surprising amount of character complexity, and another movie that's very similar, which is definitely reframing how I'm looking at this era of westerns. It's like it sounds like there was a trend towards people getting a little tired of simplistic boys adventure style westerns and want to do something more in that space. And so seeing movies like this, it's like, oh, the people are actually wanting to do interesting and nuanced for 1943 conversations about things. And then some surprisingly some stuff has aged surprisingly well as a result of that. Some stuff hasn't,
Yeah.
but there's some stuff in here that like I'm not only surprised it's a movie 1943, but I'm surprised isn't in more movies now. You know?
And I wanna highlight that this movie did, for instance, this is one of the first, I wanna say, like, Hollywood movies that had a black character as one of the moral compasses for the movie. The portrayal of the black character, I've got some issues with, but
Yes.
at the same time, that was in of itself huge.
Sure. Yeah. And it was also a movie that turns out had a lot of struggles because as I understand it, the movie was kind of in production when World War II happened. So they had a lot of sudden restrictions because there was, like, for example, a $5,000 per film limit on making new sets because those construction materials had to go towards the war effort.
I
And
think you mean like when America got dragged into World War II,
when
right?
America, yes, sorry, yes, when America was dragged into World War II is what I meant to say. Not World War II was happening during all this, but like America got dragged into World War II while the film was in pre-production, as I understand it. So they had to kind of
Well,
make some changes.
America is the world, Eddie, so says our boy king,
That's true. That's true.
Joffrey.
Um, and yet somehow, according to studio publicity, uh, they ended up with the largest set ever constructed. It ended up being um, 2.5 square miles of set. Now, I suspect some of that was they had a lot of already standing Western sets, and they probably built on top of that, or reconstructed that, so it wasn't, like, all bespoke, and I know
Some of
they
my
actually tore
understanding,
down
they
s
broke down other years. Yeah, they broke down other sets to like rebuild onto this set.
right, right, right. So it was a lot of an interesting balance of repurposing, but still, it has that epic 40s A movie feel, which I suspect a lot of westerns at the time didn't. They were B movies, so they're done very cheaply. This was a movie that was very much meant to be that kind of big splendor. And in fact, they even tried to get Gary Cooper to play the lead, and he ended up turning it down, which is why Henry Fonda did it.
All right, I'm curious. Did you know that I would say it was a director who bought the film rights from someone else that bought the rights from the book? That original person, I won't say Hubert, someone who's like a Paramount executive or some sort, refused to have this turn into a movie unless Mae West was in it. And
Really?
yeah, the director ended up buying the rights from him so he could make the movie the way he wanted to make it.
Wow.
Don't get me wrong, I myself like seeing Mae West, but that's ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, I mean, well, I mean, we'll get into the romance angle when we get there, but like, I feel like if Mae West had been involved, her part would have been expanded, and I think it would have been to the detriment to the movie. Honestly. Mm.
So, from my understanding, there were some different scripts that went around, and some of them brought back essentially that character again.
Mm.
But we can wait till we get there to talk about that, I
Right. Right.
guess.
Right. Um, Beyond that, the only other interesting bit of trivia was that it was nominated for Best Picture for the Academy Awards, lost to Casablanca, which, frankly, not entirely surprising, all things considered. Like, I like this movie, but it's Casablanca. I get why I lost to that. But weirdly, it was the actual incident, the last film ever to have been nominated just for Best Picture and nothing else. Every nomination since then has had Best Picture and at least one other nomination.
Well, a lot of it goes back and think of what we talked about in Stagecoach, that people didn't view westerns in a light to get a bunch of nominations. They were
Right.
primarily kiddie movies, and Ford helped change some of that image, but it does not change that much. Still, kind of how superhero movies don't get a lot of nominations.
I was about to say, as more we talk about this, the more I feel like westerns in the 30s and 40s are very much for the superhero movies of their times in a lot of respects.
Yeah.
I mean, they were
Um,
not treated critically well, even though they had some really good positive things. It was the kind of movies that people, serious actors like Gary Cooper, for example, wouldn't be seen in because they were considered to be too beneath them. Yet there are so many of them made that a lot of these actors probably got their start in a western at some point, or ended up starring in western because the money was good. So yeah, there's a lot of interesting analogies to how superhero movies are now compared to how westerns were back in the day.
and they would make a lot of money. Like we could even make a Barbie analogy. How Barbie was a phenomenal movie that made a shit ton of money that was practically snubbed, and they created, I think, a special award for something that like big box earner or something, like I think was the award. I think they gave Barbie in the end, but it was a special award they made for it.
Right. Right,
So
because
it's
how dare we give a toy tie-in movie accolades?
yeah, it's it's ridiculous. So I did mention the Hayes office itself pushed back against the movie from some of the political content it was trying to talk about. Just hands down, they
Mhm.
didn't like it, and there were changes made from the book for the movie.
Okay.
This will be like a minor spoiler. The son in the book, if I remember right, hangs himself,
Okay.
and the father like stabs himself with his sword or whatever it is, like he falls on his cavalry saber in the book, because that would be really difficult to do logistically.
Right.
And the sheriff in the book lets all the people go.
So I had a note about this on there, and to the point where I actually looked up the Hayes Code, again, my research, because I was wondering, and you're right, like the ending. We'll talk more about it when we get there, but high level, the ending and the consequences are abrupt and immediate. And I was like, that has to have been a Hayes Code invention. Sure enough, one of the things the Hayes Code is be careful for sympathy with criminals. And
Yeah.
so, since all the people involved were constrained to be or considered to be criminals from the eyes of the law, the justice, it was very clear, like, no, they had to have immediate consequences for their quote unquote crime once it was realized that crime had been committed. And so yeah, it very much felt like the Hays Code, even down to the lengthy speech at the end, which I quoted from.
which was an addition that wasn't in the book, because you never
I
find
believe
out
it.
in the book whatever it is. And that's why if you watch like the old gangster movies, like Jimmy Cagney never gets away when he's a gangster. The gun mole never gets away. They all have to be put away to reinforce that good always wins over evil.
Right. The status quo law enforcement ultimately has power.
And before we go on, I am going to take a step back to talk about Sparks, who is the only black character in the entire movie. Just to comment that I know that to show how close the time frame was from this movie and the Civil War, is that actor's mother was, like, I want to say one of the first black women to win a lawsuit against the government in 1967 for like not letting her ride as a first class passenger on a steamboat. And she was like an
Wow.
activist during Reconstruction. During 1867 is when that happened. And we're talking about a movie in 1940. And like that was his mother and his link to the Civil War
Hmm.
in this film.
Right. Yeah. And I'm sure, yeah, we'll talk about more about Sparks as we go through. But like, yeah, I was again genuinely surprised at like how he was portrayed in 1943. Yes, there are some problems in the portrayal, but also there's some things in that performance that again we don't see enough of now. Right.
Yeah. That's pretty much what I know about the film. It is not one that I know a lot about, but it's a Western that I don't think a lot of people talk about that I think everyone should see.
Which is wild to me because again, coming to this relatively fresh, I don't know necessarily what the most iconic Western films are compared to little known Westerns. This felt like it would have been one of the more iconic Western films, right? And so it's a bit of a surprise to hear that that's not true. But everything I understand is like it was successful at the time. Obviously, I mean, it got a Best Picture nod. Um, and I know that I don't know about Henry Fonda, but I know that Harry Morgan thought very fondly of his time at it, which was again super weird because I really know Harry Morgan from MASH, and so I know him primarily as a comedic actor.
Yeah.
And so I was like, of course he's done stuff before, but it was still a bit jarring because he doesn't look any different, right? Like from when he's a MASH, like 30 years later, he looks the same guy. That's Harry Morgan. Holy shit, that is straight up Harry Morgan. You know?
He's like Judi Dench, who looks
Yes,
consistently the same for like 50 years.
I know. It's like how do you do that, man?
See,
Um,
I know Harry Morgan I know him from MASH, but I primarily know him from like the Support Your Local Sheriff movie. I think it's first place I saw him,
okay,
which is, yeah.
I've
And
not
then I
seen that
think he's
either.
also in Support Your Local Gunfighter. Can't remember that off the top of my head.
Huh? Yeah, I didn't know. His Western oeuvre is something I was completely unaware of, and apparently he's in quite a few of them.
All right, I'm ready if you are. Let's
All right,
get
let's
into
do it.
this epically long 18-hour film.
I know it's massive. We have to do it in 5 or 6 chunks. Nevada, 1885. Art Croft and Gil Carter ride into town of Bridger's Wells. They go into Darby's saloon and find out that the atmosphere is subdued in part because of the recent incidents of cattle rustling in the vicinity. Everyone wants to catch the cattle thieves. Gil learns that his former girlfriend left town to start the spring and drinks heavily to drown his sorrows. Art and Gil are possible rustler suspects simply because they're not often seen in town. The townspeople are wary of them, and a fight breaks out between Gil and the local rancher named Farnley. Immediately after the fight, another man races into town on horseback, goes into the saloon, and announces that a rancher named Larry Kincaid has been murdered. The local townspeople immediately form a posse to pursue the murderers, who they believe to be the cattle rustlers. The posse is told by the local judge that they must bring the presumed rustlers back alive for trial, and that the deputization by a deputy is illegal, but no one listens to this. Art and Gil join the posse as well, as much to avoid being its target as to participate. Davies, who is vehemently opposed to forming the posse because of its capacity for mob rule, also joins. Along the other people in the posse are Major Tetley and his son Gerald. The Major informs the posse that 3 men with cattle bearing Kincaid's brand have just entered Bridger's Pass and therefore shouldn't be too difficult to catch. So that was a lot, but also it's only the first 22 minutes of the film. So, like, a ton happens very quickly. The pacing on this movie is staggering. It's good, but it's fast.
Yeah, but at the same time, even that opening shot we get of the 2 riding up on their horses is not quick. It's not drawn out,
No.
but it's that you see them come up, it's like a sort of a long shot, and they go in, and you start building up rapport immediately.
Well, that's one of the things that I noticed right away is, uh, uh, similar to a lot of noir, um, they do a lot of character sketching very quickly, and it's primarily done by what appear to be completely innocuous conversations. Um, a perfect example, and when I immediately realized, oh, this is a noir film, is when Art and Gil come in, and there's a painting behind the bar, and they spend like 2 minutes talking about the painting. Um, but I realized it's the because it's a guy coming in to see a woman. The painting is without, and Art makes the comment of, "Boy, it's taking him a long time to get there," you know, and Gil's like, well, I think he's just always been there, right? And Art and Gil talking about their respective of the man in the painting tells you immediately what their respective characters are, and the bartender's like, I don't know, it's just a painting I got, I guess, right? It's like, okay, you're not an important character. We can ignore you. Great. Um, and then when Gil and Farnley start to fight, it is about the cattle rustling and the suspicion, which is relevant to the plot, but that's not why Gil goes off. Gil goes off because his girl left him.
Yep.
And so there's a lot of complicated relationships that are happening in either. So basically, every conversation is doing double duty, which is very much a staple of noir films. And so that's why a lot, and also a lot of characters are introduced, and not all of them are given complexity, but all of them are tying into this complicated web of relationships. So that's why it doesn't feel rushed. To your point, when the scene takes the time, it takes the time, and it is also 1943 pacing, but because it's so well written and so well acted, they can shortcut a lot of things that other movies would have to kind of scaffold and explain. They can kind of get right to the meat of the matter, which is the actual titular Oxbow incident, without having to over explain things.
And at the same time, with Gil and Art being our primary protagonist, that we at least we believe to be our primary protagonist right now, Gil getting into a fist fight with someone else and losing what could potentially be viewed in the 40s as Gil being a weaker man. And instead of having
Right,
that happen, he gets into his fight, and the bartender is the one that ends it with a surprise hit, which therefore lets us have the fight with Gil in anger, retaining Gil's, I'm using finger quotes, masculinity for the fight, and
right,
having Art sort of drag him out and saying, explaining to everyone that he's in the fight because he lost his girl, and it makes him always feel better. So
right.
you're already get all that scenery. You retain whatever masculine machismo you need for the Western genre, and you have Art here to explain it to the audience that may not get why he's fighting.
Yeah, but it's funny because even now, I mean, and I see that point, and I completely agree with you. But also, the movie doesn't entirely buy into that premise. Again, it feels a bit Hays Cody, right? Because it feels like the script said this is what happens, but the director pushed the performance. Like Gil is struggling to recover after that fight. He doesn't just pop back up and he's ready to go like a Western hero, right? He's in a chair,
Mm-hmm.
he's staring off into space, he's concussed, even though they probably quite had the language for it then. So he did not get off from that fight lightly. And so you're right, he gets off technically, and so like we have checked the box where this has
Yep.
not happened, but also Gil is flawed and flawed in a way. And so watching the movie try to thread that balance of staying to the Hays Code. This is probably one of the movies we're talking about the most with the Hays Code because it feels like it's the Hays Code is the most shaping this film, but it is feel like it's definitely weeding between what is ultimately a crime story and trying to keep it to a Hays Code approved Western popular movie. And it's interesting the movie and the direction does keep tipping on the side of the crime, the noir. It doesn't quite go too far, but I could definitely see where like it's the where if that didn't exist, where the movie would have gone, it would have been a much darker film. So it keeps touching in that darkness, and one of those is Gil just being this very conflicted, complicated man.
Yeah, and one of the changes from the book is in the movie they made Gil less callous than what he is in the book.
I can see that.
So the film did a lot of stuff to change what the book did, but still retains like the source material itself, which is really impressive
Right.
given the 40s,
And
even today.
so we have Art is like um he's trying to basically just get Gil out of the situation, like you said. Like he's covering for him, but by covering for him by explicitly saying what's going on. So it's interesting, but like again, every dialogue's doing up a duty. Like on the page, it's let's explain why Gil got into this fight, and Art is doing that duty. But the way he's playing it is very kind of, hey, fellas, calm down. He's just, he's mad about his girl, and it's okay. Um, Even though he just found out along with Gil that she's not there. So there is in no way that his excuse of he's always like this when he loses a girl actually carries water, right? He is lying. And that tells us about Art's character, which is that he is friends with Gil enough that he will lie and cover for him, even though Gil is a hothead. So that tells you about their relationship, right? And so knowing that Gil is a bit more callous in the book makes sense. Because Art is kind of, I feel like there's a draft of the script, or maybe in the original book, where Art was actually more of the moral compass to Gil.
Yeah. That would have been interesting to see.
Right.
It also found it fascinating that Davies is a person that sends them to go talk to essentially try to find the sheriff, but warns him about the deputy like right away. So they're known in town, but they're not part of town,
Right.
which is a distinction that I don't think a lot of Westerns go into that I remember. So much so that everyone's familiar with you, but still no one trusts you if something goes sideways, which is a lingering threat that puts them in a unique situation.
Right, and again, it goes back to, we talked about with, the last movie in that, a lot of Westerns, the idea is the character is an outsider who comes in and passes judgments on the community, which is flawed in some way, whereas in Stagecoach, the community was the stagecoach. Um, Here, we have something completely different happen, which is that they are outsiders in the regard of they have not been around lately. So they're not up on the latest news, but there are enough of the community that there are characters who care about their well-being and they won't quite go to bat for them, but they will at least warn them. So again, it adds the tropes are still held, right? On a macro level, on a design level, two people come into town and they get involved in an incident that's not of their making, and they have to bring outside justice onto a corrupted community. That's all still there, but because they are also essentially part of the community, the stakes they have into it have changed, right? So like they're not just being killed because they're strangers. They're being killed because they're not going along with what everybody else wants to do. And that is a much more terrifying prospect.
So I don't want to give too many spoilers. I'm gonna note that, and I want to come back to that a little bit later
Okay. All right.
because I'm in partial agreement with you, but I'm not totally.
Sure. And I'm happy to talk about that. The other thing I do want to mention on this section is one thing this scene establishes that becomes a running bit later is the idea of hanging is also just straight up entertainment at this point to some people. Um, uh, uh, while no one ever says these words out loud, it is very much heavily implied by certain characters that will then have those beliefs challenged later on, that they're doing it because they're fucking bored. And that's I was genuinely surprised to see that in a 1943 movie being an actual thread that the movie then engages with.
So, how much of this I want to get into? I'm only going to touch on a little bit of it, but historically, there have even been mayors. I want to say somewhere between the 30s and the 50s who ran part of their political campaign on the lynching of black men, and it was a
Mhm.
big event that people would go and see to watch that happen.
Right.
So that is a part of that systemic culture that was there all the way up. I want to say to the 50s. I'm iffy on 50s, definitely in the 40s.
Right.
So I guess for me, I'm less surprised that a movie made in the 40s. by someone who is trying to be subversive would talk about that. Because even that's Sparks even acknowledges that like he had a brother or someone who was hanged. So that's touching on that historical thing that is still probably relevant to them that they could have seen in their papers.
Well, I mean, the fact it's relevant wasn't the surprise to me. The fact that the movie was like, and maybe that's fucking awful, was a surprise to me. Because the people who are arguing for it and are bored are not nuanced characters. They're very clearly meant to be the more villainous, for lack of a better term, characters we're not supposed to sympathize with at all. And they get worse as the movie goes on. So, like, not every character has that deep interior life. And so the characters are like, "Ah, we should do this because, we haven't hanging in weeks, right?" It's meant to be just offensive and feel wrong. It's clearly intended because everything else I've seen in the movie, like they had to intended. So the fact that again, movie 43 is like going, "Hey, hanging people because you're fucking bored is actually really awful," was a surprise to me.
Cool. Because the other thing is, if you look at the mob that's building, one of the lead voices in that mob is a woman that wants to go and hang
Yep.
all these people.
Mhm.
And that in itself, I think, was like monumental and groundbreaking to see that because there aren't there aren't going to be a lot of women in this film, but the fact that one of them is an active participant that wants to get this shit done and seems to be super competent to do it is fascinating and terrifying given this movie.
Right. Yeah.
Because if you even just going to think about Stagecoach, that was 4 years earlier, there were more women in the film, but none of them were given, I want to say, like an active role. They were more secondary characters. Even the lead love interest, who's like was top billed on the film, was not like an active force in the movie.
No, no. Most of the women were either prizes to be won or reasons for the male characters to grow in their character arc. So they were plot devices rather than characters. Even though they're well portrayed and interesting, they were still plot devices. But you're right.
Yeah.
Here we have a woman with agency, and her agency is to be kind of a horrible person. That's
Yeah.
fascinating in 43.
And it shows that anybody can be a horrible person.
Yeah. Right. And again, so like this is definitely, I mean, before we crown this with too much praise, I mean, the woman is also very explicitly a larger woman and not classically attractive. So we have the rising of a particularly unfortunate trope of all the
Yep.
people who are explicitly being bad are also either ugly or disabled or otherwise not attractive characters, whereas all the people we want to believe their things are attractive. But even then, the movie still has some attractive characters who, over time, you find their opinions are actually really reprehensible. So
Yeah. Good call. Good shout out. Because I was getting excited about some of the different things that we were saying without commenting on that, which is true. And it's like, as you said, I like a horrible stereotype that is even really consistent today.
right,
Oh,
but at the same time, like I want to bring it up just kind of curtail it, but at the same time, I don't want to take away from the fact that you're right. It is genuinely refreshingly nuanced. And again, the fact that this movie is 80 years old and doing this is actually genuinely good. Mm.
so when Gil and Art go in to try to find the sheriff and the deputies there, the sheer amount of disdain the deputy has for them when they say, "Well, we're looking for the sheriff. We want to have a private talk with like the mayor or whoever it is,"
Mm.
and the deputy leaves the scene but doesn't leave.
Right.
And the camera doesn't, if I remember, the camera doesn't stay on the deputy, so you think that he's left, but he's just like hanging in the corner listening.
Hmm.
It's a nice beat to get the rest of the movie going.
Yeah, and it's the movie a couple times walks up to the line of comedy, but never quite crosses it. And one of them is the scene with the judge, where he's trying to explain a deputy can't deputize, and the way the lines are played, you can kind of hear the inflection of like he's landing on the deputy title really hard a few times, right? And he also the verb deputize comes up a surprising amount in that scene. They're trying to tell you you're a deputy. You literally can't deputize people because you're the deputy. The verb is to make someone a deputy. That's nothing you can do. It could have been played for comedy, but it's not quite. But you certainly have the judge trying to professionally contain his utter disbelief at this fucking nonsense, right? Which is good. It's really good. The judge's like, you can't, what the fuck? And again, today, with everything going on, it's actually kind of refreshing to have people go, "That's just not how things work," and then to watch things just happen anyway. It's like that certainly resonates really well today, where the rule of
Yeah.
law is only lasts as long as people are willing to uphold it, kind of thing.
Even more so, given that there are judges who are actually putting out rulings that stop the current administration from doing things, and the current administration just runs ramshot over. Because if it goes higher than those judges, other people just, green stamp it anyway.
Right, exactly. So, um, if this movie were made today, people would be outraged as a damning critique of both the US and the UK, and it's like, "No, this was made 80 years ago," and that tells you how shit has changed, but it was genuinely exciting to watch that scene because it was complicated, right? And I think it's one of those weird things where the movies age surprisingly well because I think even 20, 30 years ago, maybe even 10 years ago, that would have been like, well, of course the judge is in the right and everything's going to be fine, but like because of how things are now to 2025, there's genuine tension in that scene. Like he could just get away with this, as far as we know.
Think about how shit this town is, though. That is the deputy of the town, and even if we go back to the bartender, when we find out that Gil has lost his girl, the bartender comments that there were 3 women in town.
Right.
Like, that's how small and backward this town is. It's like
Mhm.
reinforcing that this is Nowhereville's.
Right. Right. The other thing that is interesting throughout all of this is everyone's looking. Most of the scene is basically boils down to we can't find the sheriff, and a bunch of people get mad and want to go off anyway. Um, Whether the sheriff is a good or bad person is never actually confronted during any of this. He is simply the authority. We don't know if the sheriff is just as corrupt as deputy. Clearly, the deputy is disinclined to wait for the sheriff, which implies a certain amount of conflict between the two of them. But we don't know why that is. And so, again, for me coming to this movie and having no idea what the resolution was going to be, although I suspected because I knew the Hayes Code was a thing, but like even if I didn't know for sure, it's like maybe the sheriff's just straight up even worse for all we know, right?
Were you thinking it's a Megatron Starscream kind of thing?
I was actually kind of debating that. Yeah, I was like, is the sheriff going to come up and be like, he's the person who actually murdered them? Like he's actually responsible for the entire incident, and that's why he's gone. I was like, that would be just as valid for this kind of mystery. So yeah,
And it would be more than possible given the old West stories that you hear, because you can move like 2 towns over and start a whole new life. That's how
yeah,
criminals became sheriffs. That's how sheriffs become crooks. It's a whole thing.
right. And so like, I was genuinely prepared for the deputies being kind of a dick, and maybe the reason why he's getting together is because he knows this is his only chance to actually get the sheriff before he can cover up his deed, and that's why he's so eager to push this so fast. And spoiler, it's not actually what happens. But the fact is that there's a lot of the movie's already set me up, and again, in 22 minutes for a surprising amount of nuance that it mostly delivers on, not entirely. But like it sets up a really interesting lot of moral gray in a very small space. And again, it's a small community, so more or less the entire community is involved in this incident.
And even when they go out, and like when the pseudo Confederate rides up with his son, and they're all on horses, and there's this banter about who's going to go and everything else. There is a level of tension there that is surprising to be built, and that's when we get the town drunk essentially asking Sparks, who is a local preacher, to go with them,
Right.
and in an insincere way of asking him.
Right. Because it feels, uh, as I remember the scene, Sparks was kind of added asking like, okay, now we have to have a preacher, along because which is again heavily implied they're going to kill them.
Yeah.
It's never said, but it's like we need to have the preacher along. There's the only reason at that time you would have a preacher along is to give last rites.
And Davies knows they're going to kill him, which is why he's like the constant voice of, we can't do this, we can't do that, which is in of itself sort of subverting the Western trope, because Davies is an older man that does not have the physicality to stop anyone from doing anything. All he has is
Right.
utter righteousness that he's trying to push onto everyone else.
Right. And so there's an interesting push and pull because It's the if I let Sparks come along, then I'm accepting the possibility that there will be murder, but he may also try to talk them out of this because he is a man of God. And one of the places I was genuinely surprised about how Parks is handled is that at no point in time is his faith in God made fun of, or is it a joke or a point of weakness, right? It Sparks is genuinely respected by most of the posse as he's the preacher, and so they respect him in a surprising amount for 1943 film.
Yeah, and it's they don't comment on his race, but their actions are their comments. Like, for instance,
Yes,
one of them says, "I think I have a mule that you can ride," and everyone
right.
else is on horses. There's this constant thing that's, like, being tossed down,
Yeah, that's a good point. Like the racism is much more institutional, as it were, in this movie.
which and you have to remember that this is effectively 20 years after the Civil War. So
Yeah.
you would have had Reconstruction would have already happened, then you would have had the government essentially selling out black people again, I think in 72, 75 to win an election that they don't do anything with. And they took all the troops and everything away. And that's almost when the black codes reinforced and came in full strength and vigor.
hmm but again, like I was kind of waiting for like the major to kick off about Sparks or whatnot. But again, like he doesn't ever quite do that because he's trying to pretend to be a gentleman, which is a big stick that a lot of ex-Confederates used. Was like, I'm a gentleman, I wouldn't do these things, and they use that to justify their actual racist acts.
So, all right. Sorry, excuse me. Since we're talking about the major, if I remember right, because I like this film, but I've only seen it a couple times. The major, it was not in the Confederacy. In fact, or I'm trying to remember my logistics here. He married a Confederate's daughter who hated both of them, and I think he kicked them out, which is why they live in backwater. So I think he's
Okay,
wearing a uniform without having actually served, which would also explain why he wants to kill somebody.
his son. We're jumping ahead a bit, but his son in his son's final speech heavily implies that he has stolen valor of some kind, but he never actually says it. So yeah. But at this point in time, watching the movie, I had no reason not to think he was just a Confederate officer.
Yeah.
But knowing that now, and I honestly, I kind of fell out of my head. So when you mentioned it, I've been playing it back in my head. It does recontextualize a bit. He is trying a little too hard to be the quote unquote model Confederate gentleman.
Yeah. So I'm 60% certain, but I don't remember with 100% accuracy, but I think that is true for that character. So there you go. And a lot of them are posing, are puffing out their chest in a way that they are not who they are, to try to
Yes.
reinforce once again fake male masculinity to some extent.
Yeah, it's a good point actually. In a lot of ways, this movie is, by the way, toxic masculinity has always fucking existed. I mean, really, a lot of the posse is toxic masculinity taken to its logical extreme. Except for they didn't have the terminology for that. So yeah, we're definitely seeing the major and Farnley in particular are both puffing their chests up a lot and using a lot of words like justice and whatnot to basically they just want to hurt somebody, and that's what this is all about.
I can't remember, but did they say where the major got this information from? Because he's the one that says about the past, right?
He said it
Yeah.
just came from that way because and no, so, I'm sorry. He knows because he met the Mexican who was following along with him. I
Oh,
don't
that's
think he ever
right.
gets a name. I don't think the Mexican ever gets a name, but the Mexican's like, yeah, I ran into him as we were coming from that direction, and the Mexican said I saw this stuff, and so the major brought him along. And
Uh,
again, surprisingly,
Stereotype.
the
Oh
major is
God.
treating him with respect, even though the Mexican character that Mexican character just a gross stereotype, right? So it's just is what it is. Um, but so like there's not explicitly racist acts, but basically he literally trots the guy out. He says his story. The mayor thanks him, or the major thanks him, and then literally just steps his horse in front of him and starts taking control of things. So like it's not an explicitly racist act, but it's definitely a racist act of like the you have served my purpose, now go away.
And while we've given the deputy shit because the deputy's a shit character, it is the major that tells the deputy to deputize them all.
Right. That's true. I had forgotten that.
So that's why I'm going back that the major is the ringleader of this entire thing. The
Mhm.
deputy wanted to do it and to do the entire thing, but until he got that order, he didn't break the rule of law the judge told him.
God, it just reminded me. Someone came from a made up organization with a bullshit title, just runs a ramp shot over the local justice system because they feel like they know what's right. Again, how is
Yeah.
that all resonant in 2025?
It is so fucking scary that this is still where we're at. Yeah. I think that's it. I don't really have anything else for this, Pete. But for 22 minutes, Eddie, 22 minutes, all that happened.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we talked more about that section than the actual section last, just because there's so much to unpack there. It will get less. I think we'll have less to talk about as we move on, but that was a very meaty section. Okay. On their journey, the posse encounter a stagecoach. They try to stop it, but the stagecoach guard assumes that this is a stick up and shoots, accidentally wounding Art in the left shoulder. In the coach are Rose Mapin, Gil's old girlfriend, and her new, obviously rich husband, Swanson. Later in the night, in the Oxbow Canyon, the posse find three men sleeping on the ground, which they presume with what presumed to be the stolen cattle nearby. The posse interrogates the men, a young, well-spoken man named Donald Martin, a Mexican named Juan Martinez, but his real name turns out to be Francisco Morez, who claims to be unable to understand English, and a delusional old man named Alva Hardwick. Martin claims he purchased the cattle from Kincaid, but that he received no bill of sale because the sale took place out on the range. No one believes Martin, and it is therefore decided three men are to be hanged at sunrise. So I'll kind of stop there because, again, we have introducing three new characters into all of this.
Before we get too deep and serious into this, did you recognize Juan, by the way?
No, no.
He's a Joker, Eddie.
Really?
If I'm not mistaken, that is the actor who plays the Joker in the Adam West Batman with his little mustache and everything.
Wow. That's
I didn't look it
amazing.
up. That's me remembering. So take that for what you will, dear listeners.
Wow, that's awesome. Um, but yeah, before we get to the actual quote unquote cattle rustlers, um, the tension of the posse is actually still played out a bit more. And again, we come back to this trope of people misunderstanding the situation and trying to cram it into their own viewpoint. Yeah, because the stagecoach incident is like the stagecoach has a bunch of people with guns are riding up on him. He thinks to stick up and shoots. That's a very logical reaction, honestly, to have, all things considered.
Even more so because it's dark and it's at night.
Yeah,
So
right.
hands down, there's you don't ride up on a stagecoach like that in generally, but at night where they can't see you, they did their job.
Right. And then right before that though, because it's dark, uh, um, uh, Gil is just bitching about the whole like he's with Arnie, he's like, within 1943 Hays Code is basically fuck these guys, fuck this, and fuck. He's mad. He's clearly upset, and so he lights up his pipe, and Farley's like, "Put it out, we'll you'll see you." And then a bunch of people just quietly light their cigarettes or cigars at the same time. And who does it? The characters who do that are fascinating because, like, most of them are what you expect. People who've so far been sympathetic towards Gil's viewpoint, but a few of them are not. And those characters, watching their journey, it becomes fascinating over the next rest hour of the movie, right? So it's not just the good guys versus the bad guys. They're a group of relatively nameless characters with very few lines, but they are people who have shifting opinions throughout the course of this. And so that scene tells you visually what the temperature of the room is. And like there are a number of characters who actually are starting to side with Gil, which is a beautiful way, again, very noir, like a conversation about lighting a pipe tells you the actual social complexities of what's going on and the moral temperature of the room. That's very noir, and I loved that scene specifically.
Yeah, it was beautiful. Okay, the stagecoach. the love interest that comes out and she's there that should have been Mae West, according to the person that owned the rights for a while.
Right.
If that was Mae West, I don't remember how old Mae West would have been in 42, but 43. But that role would have had to have been expanded
Yes.
considerably, right?
Right.
Like she would have joined the posse at one point. It would be my assumption, the Mae West version.
Right. Or she would have been the person who would have been trying to talk everybody out of it with her feminine wiles, blah 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 blah. Yeah.
So I'm glad that didn't happen. Funnily enough, though, from my understanding, this was the third actress because they had one actress in mind, but something happened to her, and another actress they hired had like a horse accident, and this is the third actress, and she's
Wow.
actually the ones in the movie.
Wow.
I don't remember all their names. There's like a stuff that happened. And this is the person we end up getting.
I have to say when she steps out of Stagecoach, kind of the way it was shot, I did wonder if there were reshoots, right? Because like Henry Fonda and her it takes a while before they're actually in shot together. And so it did feel like they reshot some parts of it. So that may
So
lend
I
to
think
that.
this happened before the actual movie started, like in the original casting.
Oh, okay. All right. Then maybe it was just the way it was framed. Because there's a weird distance between those characters visually.
Yeah.
And
Or is
because
that trying to like display their now strained relationship through
what I
camera
think I was
work?
going to say is like because I'm so inclined to like this film, I was intentionally reading it as like that was a way to show emotional distance. It's like the physical distance will show the emotional distance is because in a less nuanced film, there would have been I married him because I thought you were gone and I secretly hold things to you. No, and she's like, no, this is my husband now. And Gil's like, okay, I'm already over you because as far as I'm concerned, you left me. So I'm being polite. And then we have, in the midst of that, her husband is also trying to be like, I understand you're the ex-boyfriends. We can be civil about this. He's trying to be extremely polite. And even that is like, it sounds like it's a conversation of the new man trying to have a good relationship with the ex, but this is happening in the context of a posse or getting together to murder someone, right? And so you
So
have this
it's
weirdly civil domestic dispute happening in a very savage environment. Is fantastic.
it's funny how you mentioned that because I have a similar view but slightly different because I get the distances there. She's married someone of wealth of influence to get out of podunk
Yep.
because even the
Oh yeah, good
boyfriend
point.
says specifically once time has passed or whatever, you can come visit us in like our estate, our
Right.
manor,
Yes.
and I can wow you with my financial penis, essentially.
Right.
Because I see Gil in that distance of him looking at her, disheartened but down to fuck, and she on the other end is like, you know what? If my husband wasn't here, I'd be down to fuck. And so that's when the husband has to intercede. Do you like how I turned this gripping noir western into a bad porn joke? And then the
Right.
husband intercedes to let him know that that's not going to happen now.
Right. I mean, and the best part is that I think both can be kind of true, right? Like, um, there's enough depth in those performances that you can kind of read both of those and have it all be happening simultaneously, right? Because like certainly you're right. Like I was glossing over it, but there is certainly an energy of I'm going to be the bigger man and try to talk you down. But you're right. He is working jabs and barbs into that quote
Yeah,
unquote reconciliation. Um, but the reason why it's so fascinating is because Gil is trying to also be a cordial and responsive back, but he's not mad about that, right? The vibe is very much the okay, sure, whatever, but seriously, they're about to murder somebody, so I want to kind of focus on that right now. So it's interesting because like it the instinct is to have them both mad about the girl, but in fact, Gil's like, "Ah, fuck her right now. I mean, maybe I'll get back to this, but at the moment, I have a bigger problem. I'm actually more worried about.
yeah. Of being lynched himself, because
Yeah,
still an outsider that's an insider with a whole bunch of people that are bored and on
right.
the hunt.
Yeah, and the movie's doing a really good job of. at this point, I should clarify. Movies are up to this point of how much of Gil's doing is out of altruism, how much is out of self-preservation. And really, to be fair, the scales are a bit more on self-preservation. It's when art gets shot that we start to see a shift in Gil.
All right. So I'm going to bring up my point from that I put a hold on earlier here.
Yeah.
Because like you talked about how it upholds sort of the general standard that like outsiders sort of coming in to like dispense justice and do good.
Right.
My stance that I'm thinking, even the more we talk about it, is they didn't come in to do good. They came in to essentially drink and have to save themselves. Our person that's doing good is going to be Davies and potentially Spark in a lower capacity. These two are simply here not to be hanged with these other people. And their journey throughout it never becomes an active force of justice. Like even I won't spoil what's going to happen, but even then, they don't say, "Yeah, let's get up there." It's Davies who's going in. You need to do this. You need to do this to every single person. It's not them taking that big step.
Uh, I see your point, but also I specifically wrote down a line because this is where I thought it changed for me. Is that in this scene, um, uh, when they run across it, they're talking about, "Hey, we're gonna go hang these people," and the major's like, "Well, this isn't really their business." And Gil points out, "Hanging is any man's business that's around, right?" So when I wrote it down and I came prepared to talk about this, I was thinking that's when he starts to cross the morality. But to your point, he could also be speaking that purely of the I don't want to be hanged.
Yeah,
So it is
because
my business and their business because I also am worried about being hanged.
in my mental image, this entire movie is just the town drunk who's all goofy and keeps making hanging noose looks at everybody.
Oh, that guy. Yeah. Yeah. That's something else that I think I have a point about that later, but like, um, yeah, let's mention it now. I will. That's relevant in the next scene, so I won't talk about why it's relevant. But you're right. He's making goofy faces and holding the noose up next to his neck, going, and joking about, "Hey, can we just stop this talking and get to the hanging?" Like it's clear this guy is just really has a boner to watch someone die.
Yeah, and we've already shown they have mob mentality. So, as far as for me, when watching this, Gil and Art are doing a very fine dance. Like,
Yeah.
we may agree with Davies, but we're not going to get in Davies' boat because we want to see which way the ship's going to go first.
You know, now that you say that, that's interesting because when I saw Gil, how Gil reacted to Art being shot, and Art's like, "No, it's just a flesh wound." Blah blah blah. I saw concern and compassion about his friend, and a flash of, um, "This is getting out of control. I need to take control." But now that you said that, I'm realizing it's also perfectly valid for them to be thinking, "This is how close to death we've gotten. We briefly slipped on that line we're walking." And Gil going, You are the only person I can trust in this whole group. I cannot lose you because if I lose you, I will also die."
Yeah.
And again, the glory of this is that both of those can be true.
It is. And we're like, what now, 35 minutes of the movie?
Yeah, yeah.
Because the other scene doesn't have necessarily a lot of verbiage to it, but it's a long stretch of the movie.
Right, yeah, yeah. The next bit is about the same length to explain, but it's about a third of the movie. So let's get into that. Um, Martin, as his last wish, writes a private letter
No,
to his
wait, wait,
wife.
wait.
Oh, sorry.
We're not there yet. Remember, these are like bigger synopsis than we normally do because we just got through talking about the stagecoach piece. Now we're
Yeah,
getting
yeah.
to Donald Martin and them.
Oh,
Like
sorry.
this
Yeah,
is
right.
where we
That's all right. Oh, sorry. Yeah, we didn't get to the actual stagecoach people. My bad. Right. Um, yeah, because we have Donald Martin, man claiming to be Juan Martinez, and Alva Hardwick, and again, like Martin appears to be innocent pretty early on. He's like, "Hey, yeah, it's a pretty consistent story." Is like but the holes are plausible holes. It's the I don't bill a sale because we met out in the range, and like I didn't have my cattle because I was part of the deals. I traded my cattle for this and whatnot. So there's a lot of his story feels consistent, but also there's enough holes in there that you could see why people aren't swayed by the argument.
but the big thing is if we're really thinking it's 1885 and they weren't like a lynch mob, a lot of deals were pretty much handshakes to some extent
Right.
until eventually they go forth and might do some paperwork and processing. But if like this guy sold it to you, he likely had no intention of really ever suing you or pursuing it. So it would have just gone and you could have gone about your way. So
Right.
there's so much validity there that it's
And what's interesting is like if you don't have that context, the scene plays fine, because it's the you could read it as the posse are looking to just nitpick because they've already got it in their heads. They know what happened, and so it's very much guilty until proven innocent. But if you have that context, then the posse takes slightly more nefarious vibe because now they're just straight up ignoring things. It's the you need to build a sale, and you're right. Like so many deals were not done with that. That it's the you're asking for like someone's driver's license when nothing they have to do involves a car kind of stuff. It's the technically this is a thing that is on the books as legal and you should have, but no one ever actually does this. So you're looking for fucking reasons.
because another big thing to remember is unlike current day, I'd say a lot of people couldn't read back then. So
Oh yeah, yeah.
what would a bill of sale potentially look like for someone? Because we haven't established if Martin can or can't read. We don't know if the farmer that sold him the cattle could read. So there's a whole other layer of complexity that's associated with that that may not be considered. And okay, so total side digression. For the Patreon, one of the movies I almost considered for Noir Month, Eddie, was going to star. I think his real name's like Dana Martin or something, but the guy who plays Martin here
Okay.
in a Noir movie.
Oh, cool. I could see him. He looks like a noir guy.
And it's a super famous noir movie. But I'm not going to tell you because you don't know who's in it. But can you guess what the movie is? The noir movie.
It sounds like maybe one of the Dashiell Hammett movies.
It's Laura.
Oh no, I wouldn't have guessed that. The other
So,
one I guess I would have made was 39 Steps, which is another one I haven't quite seen. So
it's a good one. I almost chose it, but sorry
yeah,
for you people that aren't part of the Patreon. But seeing him because I forgot he was in this, and
yeah.
we're super close. So like, I was like, oh my god.
Well, I mean, you still want to do it, again, that'd be awesome. But the other interesting thing is, so Alva is another interesting piece. He doesn't have a ton of lines, and frankly, not a ton of character. Um, but he's the character who kind of sees where this is going, right? And we have a pretty clear example of what's known as the prisoner's dilemma, right? Because the prisoner's
Yeah,
dilemma ultimately is a logical slash ethical puzzle. If you have prisoners, if they all stick to their story, they will collectively have a reduced sentence. But if one of them sells the other ones out, then he may go free while everybody else gets a worse sentence. That's the basic of the prisoner's dilemma. Um, and so this is it's a slightly different version of it, but basically it we take the tack that as far as we know, Juan is unable to defend himself. We don't know that yet. So basically, it just comes down to Martin and Alva's words against each other, and Alva's like, "No, he fucking did it," because he thinks if I sell the other two guys out, I will survive.
yeah. But we also have the major,
Mm.
who told him, who eventually said, if one of you like confesses or whatever, the other two will hang, and you can
Right,
wait.
right, exactly. And so again, it's explicitly the prisoner dilemma because it's this isn't you were told this is what the stakes are, and you have to trust that this system will actually uphold their part of the bargain. Um, and so I was like, "No, Paul, I'm scared, I'm terrified, so I'm gonna call it out." And then Martin's like, "He's delusional." And what's interesting is that the movie never really addresses that point, whether Alpha is actually delusional or if Martin's just using that as an excuse to try to discredit the fact that the guy sold him out.
But based on what we're seeing from Martin's character, it doesn't say, but we would therefore assume that Martin is being an honest voice so far
Yes,
throughout the whole
yes,
course of the movie.
right. He is an attractive white man, so therefore odds are he's probably right.
So my thing though is Davies, who's actively working against these people being hung, is not saying they're going to go free. He's simply saying, wait for justice. Like, don't
Right,
hang them tonight out in the woods. Like that is
right.
the full extent. And this mob doesn't want to wait like 12 hours.
Yeah, yeah, and that's what's interesting is because, like, prior to this, the argument was, we don't know if it's true or not. So, I'm trying to get you to stop doing this because you don't have full facts. And now they have negotiated down to, let's just wait until we can take them back into town and get the sheriff and the judge involved. It's like, this is essentially what you want. So I'm going to give that to you under these conditions, and now their artifice is ripped free. It's like, no, that's not actually what we wanted. We just want to murder people.
Yeah. And the biggest compromise they come to is like, we'll wait to sunrise to hang him. Which is even worse at that point in time, because now you have these people sitting here for hours knowing they're going to die, where essentially then if you wait another 6 hours, the sheriff would be there.
Right. And again, you have the faux gentlemanly action of the major going like, let's get them some food and coffee. And it's like, you're going to kill them in 6 hours. Why does that matter?
It's called a last meal, Eddie.
Right, but see, it's the performative nature of being a quote unquote good person, and the artifice of justice in this moment, because like no one believes this is actually justice, but he still feels the need to pretend like it is.
I love the fact that I think it's Martinez is one of his names, eats and drinks. Everything is put in front of him. He's like, man, I'm going to eat, I'm going to drink, and everything else. And you can tell he has a plan out of the three of them.
Right. I definitely want to talk about him, but I want to wait till the next section because I have lots of thoughts about him.
Okay.
Is there anything else about this section?
No, we're good.
All right, so now we can move on. Martin, as his last wish, writes a private letter to his wife and asks Davies, the only member of the posse he trusts, to deliver it. Davies reads the letter and, hoping to save Martin's life, gives it to the others to read. Because of the letter's eloquence, Davies believes that Martin is innocent and does not deserve to die. However, Martin finds out his letter has been read and becomes angry at the betrayal of his privacy. During the argument, Juan/Francisco tries to escape and is shot in the leg. The posse discovers that Juan is able to speak, quote unquote, American and 10 other languages, and that he has Kincaid's gun. Major Tetley wants the men to be lynched immediately because he does not want any of the rustlers to escape through the courts. A vote is taken on whether the men should be hanged or taken back to face trial. Only 7 of the group, of approximately 25 people, among them Davies, Gerald, Tetley, Gill, and Art, vote to take the men back to town. The rest support immediate hanging. Gill tries to stop it, but is overpowered. The group must choose 3 people to hit the horses out from under the condemned men. Farnley and Jenny Greer volunteer, and Gerald Tetley is ordered by his father to be the third. While the others hit the horses of the old man and Francisco, Gerald Tetley does not, and the horse simply walks away from under Martin. Farnley shoots Martin to kill him. So, let me start by saying Francisco is a badass.
Yeah.
Right? So the guy who's like, I don't speak English, he speaks 11 fucking languages. He barely almost manages to escape a mob of 25 people, throws knives at them, and basically cuts a bullet out of his own fucking leg, all while just calmly talking to people. And I'm like, why is this guy not the star of his own movie?
Because he's not. It's 1940. I'll just leave it at that.
Right.
But yeah.
But like, I mean, I could like. This guy basically, if he hadn't died at the end of it, I would have the headcanon of this guy is Zorro. I mean, he totally has that vibe, right? I mean, he's just, again, like I was surprised that a 1943 movie would have portrayed a man of color to be so adept. Like and when he speaks English, it's perfectly flawless. And in fact, that he just casually mentions, "I speak 10 other languages." It might be braggadocio, but probably not. There's no reason to lie about
At
that
that
at this point.
why are you gonna lie?
Right. And it's like he's a gambler, and it's like clearly this guy is way more than a gambler. Some kind of weird like assassin, or again, like he could be Zorro. Like the way he acts is like, when this guy has a secret past. Totally.
The best character in the movie. And
yes.
It's one of the funny things though, is that generally, how do I want to phrase this one? Since I think we're under the illusion that he would be like an immigrant into the US. So that immigration, it's the fact that he speaks multiple languages and everything else, while dumb Americans speak generally just English, and they're not willing to learn other languages or expand their own horizons. This movie reinforces that with Moraz as a character who is fucking phenomenal.
Yeah. Yeah, and, I mean, I made the joke of, like, "Does he speak American?" Because that's the woman, she's the one's like, "Oh, he speaks American," and, like, it's a joke at the expense of the status quo, again, so, like, you know, because he follows up with, "And what 10 of the languages, my darling?" I mean, like, he's actually a gentleman compared to the performative major,
Yeah.
because he's very much the, um yes, he lied. Yes, he tried to get out of it because they were gonna kill him. But once he's discovered, he just, quietly again, like someone's trying to dig a bullet out and he's struggling. And the guy like says, he's like, let me take care of it. Mostly to help the guy who's clearly struggling to do it. You know, he again, like you said, he eats and drinks. He holds himself upright. He has all the gentlemanly virtues that the Confederate generals aping, but not actually living.
And the other thing is when they're about to be hanged, Morez is the one that tells Martin to, like, die like a real man, like, "Stop whining.
Yeah,
They're gonna
yeah,
kill us, so we got no choice. What you're doing ain't gonna help."
right. So like, it was fascinating to me is like I walked away from this movie going, Francisco's the most of a man out of this whole film. He's the least toxically masculine,
Yeah.
and I'm just like,
And
that's fantastic. Here again, favorite character in the movie.
and it's the guy that was gonna take the bullet out was too queasy to do it, so it wasn't
Yep.
that shows, like, he has compassion even for the people that are about to kill him. Now, mind you, if the queasy guy had just been stabbing around his leg, it would've sucked and been really painful, but there's a level of compassion there too. Oh,
Right.
and even when they say, "Don't give him the knife," like, 20 people are afraid of this one unarmed wounded guy.
Yeah. Yeah. Um,
Pretty fucking ridiculous.
and so um and then we get to the voting. And even the voting, right? Like I could see this again, me knowing a bit more about how people work. I could see the loaded psychology because what the major says is anybody who disagrees with this, go stand over there. And that is social pressure doesn't work that way. People are going to be less inclined to go against what the crowd wants. That's just how people are wired. We're herd animals. And so if you tell someone you have to take an explicit action to ostracize yourself from the group, that is going to be much harder for people to do.
Yeah.
And the fact that 7 people do that is actually really impressive. But, like, so all the people who are on the fence are going to, by default, support his arguments. And
Yep.
have chosen to that he intentionally designed it that way, based on everything I've seen in the movie so far. He knows he's worked with soldiers. He knows what people are like. And so he's made it very clear. It's like going, if you feel this strongly about it, you have to stand in front of everyone and potentially even endanger yourself to stand by your beliefs. And the characters who make that trip are the telling one. And the fact is, it's not just the characters' names. A few of the characters who lit up those pipes before, some of them do actually walk across.
And for me, this reinforces the fact, though, that Gil and Art up to this point are still in we're just here for self-preservation.
Right.
Like Davies goes over and he beseeches other people, and I think Sparks comes over, and then those two are around in the middle of the people that come over.
Yes.
They don't
They're
come
not the
over
first
first.
ones.
They kind of other people are going, all right, let's go over because this is kind of what we don't really want to kill them, but
And to be
we have to, we
fair,
will.
Art starts walking before Gil does. I did notice that.
So that's like for the thing. That's why I've been having some issues with that because they are not actively fighting for it. They'll go whatever way the crowd goes unless they're persuaded otherwise.
Right. The caveat I'm continuing to have, and some of this comes down to I think maybe a slight disconnect between how the Hayes Code works, what the movie's wanting to do, which is something we've talked before, is that so much of the actual morals of what's going on in the movie are coming out of Gil's mouth, right? So from a structural standpoint, Gil is the person who's literally saying the things that everybody else he's trying to get them to agree to. But you're right that Davies is also saying that, and Sparks is also saying that. But because they're not the stars, they're not given the same weight in the how the film's put together.
Correct, because otherwise it'd be like their name over the movie instead of Henry
Right,
Fonda's name over the movie,
right.
and
So
then
how
nobody
much of
would come
this
see that
is
movie.
no? But I mean, how much of this is are we inclined to think that Gil is a good man because it's Henry Fonda playing him? Right?
A
Is
lot of
it
it.
really that simple?
which is why Sergio Leone tried to get Henry Fonda to do very specific roles in his films that would work against that in the 60s.
Oh, interesting. Okay. That's fascinating. Um,
Oh, The
and then we get
Sun. We
to
haven't really talked about The Sun. Do you want to talk about The Sun now or in a minute?
let's talk about him now because actually right before that, uh, uh, so first the major asks people to volunteer, and Farley and Jenny Greer does, but most specifically, the guy who all through this movie has been making the jokes about hanging people and whatnot, he gets a chance to step up and he turns and walks away.
Yep.
And it's like the guy who was the most keen to have the deed done will not do it himself. And just insert your social media joke about trolls here, right? Because it again pretty much speaks for itself in modern day, but it shows the moral cowardice of some of the characters. But again, it's Jenny Greer who's like, no, I'll do it. I've been saying this since day one, and I will. So the woman is the one who steps up and is like, I can fucking do this. And I feel like in 43, there was probably a bit of a more of a barb intended. Like, look, the woman can do it, but the man can't. But even that still ages well, right? Because it's like, regardless, one of the people who had strong convictions, regardless of their gender, still stood up and followed through her convictions, even though they were wrong. Whereas many of the other people who argued for it won't actually volunteer. So
Yeah. That so
yeah.
current society.
But yeah, so the major's son has been kind of portrayed as someone who is reluctant to do this, but until here, it was always kind of presented as he's just a coward, right? He's not really been speaking up much, but again, to the movie's credit, the way it's been framed is one thing that when you look back and think about it, he never really had an opportunity to because his dad kept shouting him down. And a lot of at least my belief of watching it, that he was a coward came from his father telling us that that was what was going on.
Yeah.
Um, and then here we have a fascinating complex moment because the guy, Gerard, thinks he's rebelling. I'm not going to whip the horse. I'm not going to do what I've been told to do. But he's actually making it worse for Martin because Martin's now strangling slowly. And so Farnley shoots him partially out of a desire to do, to see him die quickly. So it's partially out of compassion, but mostly it's because they want this. This is what they're here for, and they want it to happen. And so there's a level of frustration around the moment because the goddamn the kid can't even fucking kill anybody properly. Kind of vibe to it all. So it's presented as if it's a mercy killing, but it's really more just of a frustration. I didn't get what I wanted.
Mm. I don't even see it as a mercy killing. It's just a straight up killing. But it's the fact that the major also buffaloes his son, like hits him in the head with the butt of that revolver, just dropping him like bam, gone.
Right.
As his first real act of violence in the movie is against his own son. Everything else is essentially ordering other people to do violence and being the instigator for it.
Right. And to be clear, he never volunteers. His hands are clean, quote unquote, right, in the sense that he never actually. I hadn't thought about this when I was watching it, but now we're talking. I realized also the major is a lot of I'm just asking questions, right? He's that guy too, you know, he's a dare I say it, the
The
kind of
devil's
guy who
advocate.
would a middle aged white guy who would go into college campuses and claim to debate people, but secretly using that as a framing device to push his own hateful agenda on others while under the guise of debate, you know.
Yep. And they're always suckers that believe it. So yeah, this movie is painfully relevant, Eddie. Like
Yeah, yeah.
I didn't realize how relevant it would still be.
I was genuinely well, we're not quite there yet. We're not wrapping up the movie, but like um, certainly this scene in particular, there was a lot of every time I thought I knew where the movie was going, it didn't change course, but there was a layer additional. Nothing was clean. Nothing's clear. There's no that will change in a minute, but up to this point, everything's been gloriously gray. Everyone's complicated.
So now I guess you weren't, but I'm curious. Were you surprised that they actually killed all three of them?
A bit. Because again, Hays Code movies, I thought they'll talk their way out, or the sheriff will show up, or somebody, something will happen, and I get out of it. And then it's like, no, they're just dead. And then, like, even when the one horse started walking, and then when Farley shoots off screen, and it's affecting. And again, we have this weird moment of the Hays Code massively backfiring, because one of the things about the Hays Code is that you can't show depictions of on-screen violence. Um, Interestingly, when I looked this up, I didn't know this. We talked about the infamous, very early silent film where the it ends with someone shooting up the screen.
Yeah.
Turns out that incident was one of the reasons why the Hays Code came about, was because so many people
Freaked
were
out the
scared
audience
and
too much.
terrified of it. He's like, "You cannot have violence directed towards the audience, and also can't have it depicted on screen." Um, so the violence all happens off screen, but because the movie has to narratively show how these events connect, they have to imply the violence, and it makes it that much more horrific. Like, we see the horse, two horses running off and one just walking. We see the two of the ropes going taut and one being loose. We see the shotgun shooting off screen towards where that rope is pointing. You paint a much more vivid image in your head, and it feels so much more violent for not seeing it.
Yeah, 100% agree.
In much the same way that someone digging a bullet out of his
Mm.
own leg seems much more badass because you don't see him doing it.
Oh god. Before we move on, Martin and the letter, once he found out it's red, do
Yeah,
you think his response is appropriate for the situation he's in?
I kind of did, honestly. Um, because one thing the movie has been training me throughout is that it is balancing the violent nature of the West with its pretensions of civility. And so the movie is keeps putting those into direct, stark contrast with each other. And so having a scene where a man is outraged that his private thoughts are being shared around when he's about to be killed felt real true to me, because on the one hand, from a narrative perspective, that's exactly what the movie's doing. But even from a character motivation perspective, Martin's just lost it, right? Um,
Yeah.
he knows he's going to die. He's terrified that he's going to die. And so this is a place that he can allow his rage and frustration at the situation some outlet, because there are going to be people who are not sympathetic to not killing him, but they'll be sympathetic to his private thoughts not being shared. And so he gets to put that anger out in a way that maybe has some actual momentum in the way that pleading for his life didn't work.
Okay. Cool.
So no, I never felt like that was weird or contrived. How everyone's reaction to that came about, however, again, is super fascinating because, um, uh, the older guy's name, I've already forgotten. There's so many characters here. Um,
Davies?
he gave it Davies. Thank you. Davies were actually like, listen, buddy, I'm really sorry. Yes, I violated your trust, but I was trying to save your life, right? And the major going, "No, I've read it, and maybe we'll think about it and blah blah blah." Like, Davies was genuinely like, this is a lesser thing. Yes, I violate your privacy, but I'm going to keep you alive, man. You know, he's the only person in this whole scene who is saying the obvious thing, right? And everybody else is like, kind of, well, the white guy is pretty eloquent and has a family, so now we kind of mildly regret what we're talking about, you know. And,
So, but
and,
the thing
and
is, they didn't read it. Only Davies read his letter right now, I think.
no,
Like,
no, the major did too. The major did
I
read
thought the
it.
major refused to read it.
Someone else read it. I thought it was the major.
I don't remember now off the
Well,
top of my head, so
right. The
I'm
point
an old man.
is like, um, the point is because and I will say, one of the places the movies fall down is that I had to watch this scene a couple of times because we don't actually see the letter being passed around. What happens is we see the letter being handed over, Davies reads it, and then now Martin is saying everyone has read it, and Davis said he's had everyone read it. Now, so now that I'm talking it out, what could have happened is no one else has read it, and Martin's overreacting.
Which was my take, because I could have sworn that, like, the major actively didn't read it and other people didn't want it to read it.
Well, I knew some people didn't want it, and it was implied a couple people couldn't, at least. But I had thought that at least one other had read it. But honestly, taking your, I'm going to concede that that's probably now because the filming was not clear. Um, let's assume that Davies only read it, and Davies is like, listen, I want other people to read it because I believe that will convince of your innocence. And Martin being rejecting that because he has accepted that he's going to die. He's like, nothing's going to convince these assholes. So give me this shred of privacy. Um, and for me, kind of how that felt was when sometimes it's better to stand for certain things rather than your own life. Alva would have done anything to try to save his own life. Francisco is just too damn cool. He's like, whatever. I'm gonna get out of this. Okay, I can't get out of this. Well, then I'm just gonna die like a man, right? Um, Martin. I keep his name confused. Martin is like, I tried to plead my way out of this because I do have a family. I want to get back to them. I can't. So then my relationship with my wife is something I can try to keep private, try to keep to me and her. And now even that's being taken away from me. So me saving my life, I'm assuming it's not even on the table anymore. So I'm not going to bother with that. But give me this one thing.
Nice.
And what I love about it is he's appealing to, by using the letter as a debate, because again, as you point out, like some people are like, I don't want to read it, but they're not demanding to read it, right? I mean, they're like, I don't care. So those characters get the moral high ground of, well, I gave him this at least. I gave them a last meal. This performative thing of like, well, I respected them. These men that I set up for murder, that I wanted to murder from the very beginning.
Yeah.
Which is really what the whole movie's about.
We can cover the last beat.
Okay. This is where the movie falls apart to me. After the lynching, the posse heads back towards Bridger, Wales. On the way, they meet Sheriff Risley, very conveniently. They tell him with pride of their actions, but the sheriff replies that Lawrence Kincaid was not killed, is under the care of a doctor in Pike's Corner, and that the men who shot him have already been arrested. Risley strips the deputy of his badge and asks Davies, whom he knows would not have supported the hanging, tell him who was involved. All but 7, Davies replies. God better have mercy on you. The sheriff tells the posse, you won't get any from me. The men of the posse gather back at Canby's saloon and drink in silence. Major Tetley returns to his house and locks the door so his son cannot come in. His son yells at him through the door, telling him what he thinks of him. Major Tetley walks to another room and shoots himself. In the saloon, Gil reads Martin's letter out loud to Art while the other members of the posse are listening. In the closing scene, mirroring the initial scene, Gil and Art ride out of town to deliver the letter to Martin's wife and family. So I joked this movie fall apart. Not really where it falls apart, but this is where the most egregious, the Hays Code must now comes in. And I do feel it undercuts the movie to some extent. Because the sheriff just like literally like the next scene, the sheriff's there and it's like, you motherfuckers, you're all wrong. Let me explain to you the entire plot of what actually happened.
So that doesn't bother me because it's like whenever you go and watch a Robin Hood movie, how King Richard always comes back right after Robin has done whatever it is to take down the sheriff of Nottingham. It has that same vibe and feel to it.
Sure,
completely.
Right.
It's like everything's over. Now I show up. Just like in a horror movie, the police show up at the end to fuck stuff up.
Right. I mean, so, like, again, like, I mean, given for 1943, I think this is the best possible resolution you could have had. So I'm really trying to keep that in mind. I think my frustration is so much this movie has aged well. I would love to see a version of the movie where this just doesn't happen, right?
Mm,
Um, uh, uh, but I mean, what I will say for the movie is the horror on the many of the other characters' faces when they realize what they've done, and that long silent scene in the saloon is doing a lot to try to sell the core of this movie, right? Of like, we got wrapped up in this, and the major is the reason why we got wrapped up in this. He, of course, conveniently commits suicide, but his son rips into him. You know, it's like his son finally has had too much, not enough. He's done with what's going on, and tells his father exactly what he thinks of him in as clean a way as he can. But like the fury in that dialogue is really palpitating. It hits, because his son is just like, I am so furious at what you made us do and what I almost did and what I was party to. The self this because it's not always anger at him, but also self-loathing, which is
yeah.
great.
So I like the ending, but I don't like the ending, and I can't quite
The
put.
moral of the story coming from Gil at the end.
Yeah, yeah. It's because like from my understanding, the letter is not read in the book. That the letter doesn't have like that text in the book, but they created it for the movie, which I understand from a studio perspective that you need to have Henry Fonda tell that to like pass judgment on all those people essentially from the letter from the vantage point of a dead man.
Right.
But I don't like it. But because I
So,
would have rather had the sheriff actively arrest them to like have executed
sure.
justice.
Right. I agree with you. Like, if that was the movie we're doing, like, just go the extra mile and have the sheriff like going, okay, no, I'm you're not deputized. This is illegal, so you're all under arrest, right? And just put them all in jail. Um, if that's what's going to happen, it's going to happen. But I will say, part of the reason why I'm not happy with, but willing to accept this ending is partially because of how Henry Fonda puts so much exhaustion and trauma into the reading that letter that it's not earned, but it feels earned, if that makes sense, right? Like it's an abrupt ending, and it's very clearly an ending to present a certain moral stance, but it does feel like Gil has been permanently changed by the events of this in a way, and so like the way he reads it and the way I felt when he's reading it, he's not the letter is passing judgment, and he's conveying that judgment, which is correct from a structure standpoint. But he also doesn't feel like he has excluded from that the way he
Yeah.
and I have to pass the letter on. I tried every step to stop it, but I didn't. So I'm still a party to it. And that feel so like it feels emotionally earned rather than legally earned, I guess is the best way to put it.
Okay. I can see that, but it still just
No,
rubs
I
me the
agree with it.
wrong
It's
way at
not
that
great.
point. And at one point, I could maybe it's because they want to stay somewhat true to the book, so they don't say that they're going to be arrested, but they lose they'll be arrested because in the book the sheriff tells them, eyeballs them, and says, "You're all free to go," essentially,
Right.
which reinforces that entire mob mentality of lynching.
Right. Right. Mhm. And so it's this is the most explicit part where it's clear the movie and well, I should say the story wants to go in a certain direction, and the mandates of the motion picture industry at the time would not allow it to go there, and so it tried to find a middle ground, and it kinda not really works.
And I think one draft here had the ex girlfriend and her new husband show up at the end.
That would be so dumb. Like, so okay, I will say, like, having stepped back from the whole movie, the whole girlfriend thread doesn't feel like it does anything, but it it does. In a way, it does. Um, because it's necessary for us to see Gil as having a lot of selfish reasons for being part of this. That he's not doing this from a purely moral standpoint, and so having his girlfriend show up and him having a different reaction than we expect to that shows that something has shifted and since the start of the movie. So, like from that perspective, it's necessary. But like her character is largely extraneous, and her husband's character is largely extraneous.
Yeah.
So having them come back, I could see why scriptwriters' time would have been like, oh, we should do more with this character, especially if it had been a big name actor. It's like if it was Mae West or whatever. It's like, yeah, of course we're gonna find more scenes to cram her in, but that would have just diluted that even further. It would have like shown like just how unnecessary this subplot really is.
And so we don't know. I'm going to say we for this one. We don't know if Jane, I don't remember her last name, starts with an A, is super famous. So she
Right.
could have been, but she is
Fair.
not Mae West famous.
Right. Right. So yeah, I mean, all in all, really enjoyed this movie. Uh, of the two we have watched, I have enjoyed this the most.
um, Technically, Eddie, I think you also watched that 15-minute film. So we've watched 3 for
Fair enough.
you and like
Of the
4 for
3 movies
me.
I have watched, this is the best.
I thought you liked it as a Western. Any other closing thoughts? I think we actually covered most of our closing thoughts throughout this entire one for this one.
Well, yeah, because honestly, this is one of the movies where our structure doesn't quite work because it is hard to break it into chunks because a lot of the character stuff flows between scenes. I mean, there's pretty obvious breaking points, but also as you heard, we couldn't quite talk about everything because we had to talk a little bit about what's going to happen after and what for it. And it is definitely one of those movies where it's not a twist per se. It's not like a Twilight Zone. Everything you knew was wrong. It's not quite that, but it does help you to recontextualize what you thought you knew about the characters at the beginning are different from what you know about the characters at the end. So again, it's hard to talk about it in isolation to a degree, and that's what I think makes the movie really compelling, and certainly makes it very noir to my mind because it is unlike some noir films where the detective is the unflinching moral rod that refuses to bend in a sea of corruption. This is much more the kind of noir where there are no good decisions, only slightly less bad decisions. And so, at any point in time, this could have stopped if anyone made one good damn decision, but no one's making any good decisions at any point in time in this movie, except for the sheriff showing up and conveniently telling everybody they're wrong.
And I enjoy this movie. I do. It's not in my top 10 westerns, but it's a new Western noir, and Western noir is something that's always sort of appealed to me. It's the
Mhm.
moral ambiguity that's associated with it, but at the same time, like I've already said, I need a sense of like final justice associated with it, or to make it feel like something is missing for that hit for me. That the same I wouldn't say the same thing about like a 40s noir movie because those are often murky endings like this, but it feels different. Like the Western feels like you have a more definitive end to it, to their story.
And that brings up an interesting point, right? Because I mean, this whole podcast is about the fact that genres are nebulous and fluid. But you bring up an interesting point: is in 1943, can a western have a murky ending? I know just because I live in pop culture that this will be confronted and examined in later decades. But in 1943, was that even a possible ending? I don't think that's an answer, right? You're right because noir films, as we call them, were crime films, and so crime films can have murky endings. Also, they were B movies, so they were not scrutinized as much, so they can have murky, muddy, weird endings because they were experimental and cheap and disposable. But this is supposed to be a big budget 1943 movie. It had to have something resembling a clear justice because that's not only just what westerns do, but I think that's what big movies 1943 do.
Yeah. Uh, so all right. Next time we come
Yes.
back. So you're probably curious that I jump ahead 2 or 4 years so I can make this an epically long run. No, because Eddie wouldn't let me. So instead, we're going to
Right.
jump all the way to 1952 with another seminal classic, High Noon. Pew pew.
I've heard of this one.
You've never seen High Noon?
I probably have. This is the other problem is that there are going to be, I think, movies as we go through that I'm like, I've not watched any Westerns. I know I have watched some, and then I'll watch it. Oh, I've seen this. That's probably going to happen, but I don't remember what the titles are. So I probably have seen High Noon, but I don't remember it.
Inconceivable. If people want to like give you money and support you for this nonsense that we continue to do years later, where can they do that?
You can find me at pugsteady.com. That's my website. That is where you can find me on Blue Sky, or you can buy my silly dog game that has no westerns in it whatsoever at realmsofpugmire.com. How about you?
If you want to support me, you can come to darkrootstudios.com, where you can buy Haunted West that has a whole bunch of Western in it,
You
and some
should.
weird creatures, and some history that I may have touched on today.
Yeah.
Otherwise, jump on the Discord.
If you want a noirish western, you could definitely do worse than Haunted West. So with that, we will talk to you next time about High Noon.